the Assistant Chiefs of Licensing here at the Registrar of Contractors, and I supervise the team of licensing account professionals to review new applications and other license maintenance items.
And Julie Pickrell.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Julie Pickrell. I'm the Chief of Licensing. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And Miss Jessie.
Hi, I'm Jessie Winter. I'm the Public Information Liaison.
And where's Jacqueline this morning?
Holding down the fort.
Okay, so Jacqueline is another Assistant Chief of Licensing, and she would be another person managing the individuals who will be processing your applications. Can everyone see my PowerPoint all right? Great. All right, so just we went through welcomes and introductions. House rules. Please mute yourself if it becomes an issue like background noise or anything like that. We'll go ahead and mute for you. If you do have a question, feel free to unmute yourself though, or use the chat function. And you probably saw on the screen pop up, we do record this, and we record this meeting for your benefit. At the end of this seminar, probably end of this week, beginning of next week, Jesse is going to send you an email, and that email will include a link to YouTube where this video will be uploaded so that you can watch it whenever you are getting closer to applying if you're not thinking about applying right now. So it's just a good refresher for you. Anyway, so what do we want you to go away with? We want you to be comfortable using our website. We want to avoid common deficiencies that we see. And also, obviously, we're here to answer any questions you may have. A lot of times you may just have one or two questions that are one or two things that you don't feel comfortable with about the application. If we can alleviate those and get a correct application in, that's what our hope is. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Marley.
All right. So we want to first start the presentation by going over common application. Sorry. So first, we're going to go over some common application errors. So we're going to help you not have these errors in your application so that can be processed quicker. So the top 5 common errors we see in applications are: first, the qualifying party's experience either isn't relevant to the classification that's being applied for, or it's not detailed enough. The second is the bond. We'll go over this in more detail, but sometimes there's minor errors on bonds that need to be corrected before we can approve the application. The third is a copy of government issued ID not being submitted, or the copies are of an expired ID. Everyone on the application has to submit a copy of the government issued ID. The fourth is testing, either not submitting required testing or that testing being outdated. And then finally, background checks. Everyone on the application needs to submit a background check, and those need to be within 90 days of the application being submitted. So they can't be older than 90 days old.
Great. Thanks, Marlene. I was just told that actually the portal that we're going to be talking about is going to be down from December 21st through December 24th. So if you were looking to apply for your license next week, just be aware of that. So December 21st through the 24th, it's going to be down, or taken down for maintenance rather. All right, back to you, Marlene.
Okay, so we're going to briefly go over what the Registrar of Contractors is. So we're a cabinet level agency. We report directly to Governor Ducey, and there's 3 main departments that comprise our agency. The first is licensing. Licensing reviews new license applications. We get approximately 4,000 a year. So we issue those licenses, and then once you have your license, we help you maintain that license. So any changes you need to do would be through our department. Then we have compliance. They investigate both licensed and unlicensed complaints, and they refer citations to our legal department, which is the 3rd department that handles the complaint process and also administers the recovery fund. Okay, so Jim just mentioned our online portal. This is how 90% of our applications are submitted. It's convenient and accessible. You can use it 24/7. It doesn't need to be during our business hours. You go online, make an account, you can start your application, save it at various points, and once you're ready to submit, you can submit it there. You can also mail in applications to us. In certain instances, you can email that application to us. So if you need to submit your application during those 3 days when the portal is down, contact us. and we can point you towards another method to submit it, but otherwise most of our applications are submitted on the online portal. And the first step to using the portal, we're going to go over how to use the portal so you're comfortable doing that, since most applications are submitted on the portal, is creating an account. So there's certain information that's required to create an account. You're going to need to designate one person that has a login for that account. And this will be the slide. Sorry. So this authorized representative's information that's needed in order to create the login. This could be an employee of yours that handles all of your online licensing needs. If it's just you running your business, this could be you, it could be a spouse. You just need to designate an authorized representative that can submit this information on behalf of your company. And we need to know their name, date of birth, an email address, how they prefer to be contacted, and then they're going to set up some security questions in case they ever get locked out of their account. And then we're going to need to know information about your business entities. We need to know the type of entity. Is it an LLC or a corporation? If so, we need to know the AZCC file number. If you're a sole proprietor, we need to have the name as it's spelled on your government issued ID, or if you're a partnership, we need that partnership information. We're also to know contact information for that entity, so email address, business address, phone number. This will create your account. Once that's created, you can go online and submit your application.
Sorry about that, Marley. I was distracted by the little red line down through the slide.
Oh.
Easily distracted. So if you picked up on what Marley's talking about, or if you're new to the state of Arizona, in either case, we in Arizona treat licensing of construction a little bit different than most other states. We actually license a business entity, not an individual. So I'm from Ohio, where a municipality would license an individual. Here we license a business entity, so LLC, corporation, partnership, sole proprietorship, and then anybody with the exception of sole proprietor, because that's of course one person, but with that exception, any employee that actually works for that business entity would not also need to get a license. So it's just that company that needs a license. Cool. Marley?
All right, so to go to our portal, this is found on our website, which is roc.az.gov. And then you're going to click the My Account button, which is right next to the home button at the top of our website. This will give you access to our portal. You can create an account like we just discussed, and then go online and submit your application. Okay, so once your account's created and you're going to start filling out the application, we're going to go through the information that's needed. This information is needed whether you're applying on the portal or one of those other methods that we talked about. So first, we're going to need to know who the applicant is. As Jim discussed, there's different types of entities. So we have sole proprietor and partnership. The name of this entity is going to be exactly as it appears on your government issued ID. If you're applying as a corporation or an LLC, the entity name is exactly as it's spelled and filed with the Arizona Corporation Commission. And then if you're applying as a trust, it's exactly as that name appears on the trust certificate. And then this is optional, but some people want to have a DBA or doing business as for their company. So you would need to include this information on your application so that we know that you want to use that DBA. This also needs to be on your bond. And it's recommended that you register this name at the Arizona Secretary of State. But again, that's just a recommendation from us. And at any time, you can add a new DBA to your license. You can remove it if you no longer want to use it, or you can change or update it. You can do that at any time through a name change form that you would submit to the licensing department. And it just allows you to advertise as another name if you didn't want to solely advertise as your entity name.
So an example of this would be Jesse and I have a company that is called J&J Construction. Our DBA could be J&J Plumbing, and that would tip off or typify what type of work we do. So a DBA, often what we see is that a DBA is a more creative name, whereas the the actual entity name is more of a just who owns the corporation or LLC, I guess in my mind is how I think of it. Is that about accurate, Marley?
Yes. And then, sorry, I should mention that your DBA and your entity name can't be advertising a scope of work that you're not getting licensed to do. So in Jim's instance, if your DBA indicates that you do plumbing, then you need to be applying for a plumbing license or already have a plumbing license under that entity.
And it's true, you don't want me doing your plumbing.
And the next step is figuring out what license to apply for. So we have many different license classifications. They fall under 3 big umbrellas: general contracting, specialty or subcontracting, and then engineering. And so once you figure out what type of work you're going to be doing, then there's subclassifications under that we'll get into. And the next step is your qualifying parties information. So your qualifying party is the person that's qualifying for this license. They're the person that takes the statute and rules exam. All of our license classifications require that the statute and rules exam be taken. Most of our license classifications require that a trade exam be taken. The qualifying party is taking both of those exams. And then the qualifying party needs to show experience. We'll link a spreadsheet that shows the exact requirements for each license type, but most of our licenses require some range of experience, trade exam, and statute and rules exam. For the experience, we need to see the dates that they were employed there, the hours they worked per week, the position that they held there, and then a detailed description of their job duties, and it needs to be relevant to the classification being applied for. If you're applying for a roofing license, the QP should focus on roofing experience. If they have other experience, great, but we are going to be looking at that roofing experience only. And then they need to supply a reference. The reference cannot be someone else that's named on the application, but it can be a former supervisor, a coworker, even a client. But that person needs to have direct knowledge of the work that the qualifying party completed. We're also going to need to know the qualifying party's name as it's listed on their government issued ID, date of birth, social security number, copy of government issued ID, contact information, so address, phone number, email, their title or position. If they have any ownership, that needs to be indicated, but they don't necessarily need to have ownership. And then, like we discussed earlier, everyone needs to submit a background check. So this would need to be submitted. We have a certain vendor that we use for background checks. It's linked on our website. So you're going to want to make sure you use that vendor for the background checks. You'll complete the background check. They're going to send a receipt. That's what you're going to be submitting to us. And those background checks need to be 90 days or newer.
Thank you, Marley.
You're welcome.
All right, so some of you may be moving
Can I ask-
in from out of state. And this is where Marley's going to talk about waivers. But first, Ms. Jewell.
Thanks. I was just curious about the statutes and rules exam. How many questions is that? Because I know the manual is 177 pages, which is quite daunting.
Yes, let me find you the exact
I'll tell you what,
number
Marley,
of questions. Okay. you got it.
Jesse can work on that and we can move on.
Okay. Okay.
But I think,
Thank you.
Jewel, I think it's around 80, if I were to remember right. All right, so Marley, back to waivers.
Thanks.
Okay. So in some instances, an exam waiver can be submitted, and it can either waive the statute rules exam and or the trade exam. So if your qualifying party has been on an Arizona contractor's license in the past 5 years, and it's been the same classification that's being applied for now, then the trade exam and experience can be waived. And then if your qualifying party's been named on Arizona license within the past 5 years, they can also waive the statute and rules exam. For out-of-state applicants, which we have a question, it looks like someone's an electrical contractor in California. Statute and rules exam cannot be waived because that's Arizona specific. However, the trade exam could be waived. You need to have been on a comparable license for the one that you're applying for here within the past 5 years. Qualifying party needs to be the same. So the person that was the qualifying party on that out-of-state license needs to be the qualifying party here on the Arizona license. And you're going to have an out-of-state waiver filled out. You'll fill out the top part The licensing board or agency from where your current license is in the other state will fill out the bottom part. We will review that to make sure it's comparable, was active in the past 5 years, qualifying parties are the same, but then that can waive the trade exam and the experience requirement as long as it meets all of that criteria. If the state that you're licensed in, some states don't do waivers, so submit a copy of, if there's like website information about your out-of-state license, you can submit that and we will also look into that. But most states will fill out the waiver and that will be submitted with the application.
And I can tell you specifically, we, Arizona and California have very similar licensing schemes. So California is a state that we work very close or easily with on waivers.
I have a very quick question, if I could.
Sure.
I'm from New York State, and I worked for an employer for about 5 years as a kitchens and bathrooms remodeling contractor with them. I was employed by that employer, but in that state, we don't have an actual licensing process. It's more just based on inspections as such. If I worked for him as basically a specialist contractor with the full realm of remodeling, obviously negating things that require licenses such as plumbing and electrical. Am I able to still use those 5 years of experience with my employment paperwork to be able to use that as, I guess, the requirements for being able to get a license as long as I can pass said exams?
Yes. So you said it exactly correct. It would be used as your experience on the license application, but you would still need to take the exams because you were not the qualifying party on a license in the state that you're coming from. So yes, you would absolutely use those 5 years to supplement. I believe it's 4 years for any of the licenses that you'd be looking for. But yeah, you'd be able to use those 5 years absolutely for the experience.
All right. Perfect, because yeah, it would be mainly just basic residential contracting, such as like framing of bathrooms and whatnot, and I would use subcontractors for my plumbing and electrical because you would need those licenses in even New York. So I do appreciate that. That's been one of my biggest worries of the whole process of moving out of state.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank
and just so everyone knows, when regarding experience, we take managerial or hands-on experience related to the actual scope that you're applying for. Marley, you're going to have to help me out here, but we also look at military training and experience. We also look at any college that relates to the trades, or also even, the trade schools on the high school level. We'll accept that sort of experience. So we're pretty open on the experience as long as you were the one doing it and you're applying for the license that you were actually doing.
That's awesome. I really appreciate all of that and everything you guys are doing with this. Thank you.
Cool. Right. Marley, I'm sorry, did you have anything else on this slide?
No, so we haven't gone over this part yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so we talked about the qualifying party, what's needed for them on the application. There are other certain people that are required to be on the application based on ownership. So this is set out in statute. If you're applying as a limited liability company or an LLC, we need to have all owners of 25% or more included on the application. If your LLC is member managed, we need all members. And if it's a manager managed, we need all managers. If you're not sure how your LLC is set up, this information can be found on the Arizona Corporation Commission's website. You just search your company name and they have paperwork in there telling you if you're member managed or manager managed. Then this will let you know who we need on the application. And then for corporation, we need all officers. So president, vice president, and any functional equivalent of these officers, and then any owners of 25% or more and any directors.
Hey, Marley, could you address, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine, Jesse.
Oh, there was a question from Economy Lighting, just regarding, he's an S Corp out of state, what he needs to file to add Arizona to obtain a license and wants to keep both.
Yeah, so you can certainly your out of state license and operate that there and apply for an Arizona license. That's not a problem. And if you have an S Corp in another state, you're going to want to contact the Arizona Corporation Commission and get that S Corp registered here. So they will help you get your entity set up here, and then you will apply under that entity once it's registered at the Arizona Corporation Commission.
And I just wanted to go to Joel's point. There is a lot of material for the statute and rules exam. We understand that, and we understand that regardless of whether you're moving into the state or whether you're just getting into the business, there's no reasonable, there's no understandable reason as to why you would know our statutes and rules outside of taking the test. So what we're actually doing is developing a computer-based training to help you learn what statutes and rules we want you to know. And then the test will be based off of that training. So depending on when you're planning on taking the test, we're hoping to get that out mid 2021. But of course, that's an IT project, and anybody who's worked with IT projects knows that unlike the work you're getting into, adding a couple of months is pretty typical. So we do know that it's a lot of material that we expect you to know. We're trying to pin that down and funnel it down to the information we actually want you to know.
Zach, you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, quick question. Will you guys be taking general questions or being able to answer general questions? I don't want to take up time in the middle of your slideshow and what you guys are talking about. At the end of this, will you be able to answer a simple general question?
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's, I'd rather you, so that kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. I'd rather you ask it now because a lot of people probably have that same question. So go ahead, Zach.
Well, so I plan on, I do roofing and restoration. I've been told different things from different people that I've spoken to over at the ROC and different contractors. If I want to be, roofing is my specialty, but I also, I can manage other projects and subcontract through my previous employer. But if I want to start my own company with just a roofing license, would I be able to subcontract out other trades? I've been told different things, that you have to be a general contractor to sub out any trade that you're not licensed in. Do you know the specifics on that, or if there's limitations, if I am able to subcontract out drywall, framing, painting, those types of trades that might go into a total project with just a roofing license? Or would I have to go above and beyond and get a GC license?
Yes. So our roofing license, the 42, can only sub out to another 42. So if you were wanting to do bigger projects like that, it sounds like you might have some of that experience. I would look at our general contractors licenses because they can contract out to most of the other trades. If you're doing a roofing project and say there's a small amount of drywall that needs to be repaired, most of our scopes allow for incidental work to be done by you with that classification. So if you're just talking about minor things like that that need to be done in conjunction with finishing that roofing project, as long as it's incidental and minor in nature, do that. But yeah, if you're wanting to just sub out on big projects to other license types, you would need a general contractor's license.
And the
Okay,
only,
sorry,
I put the scope in the comments or the chat. The only caveat to that is if you're replacing a roof and you come across or you realize that, so you're allowed as a roofing contractor to replace up to 10% of the substrate. If during that, if while you're taking the tile or shingles off, you realize more than 10% of the substrate needs replaced, you would be able to subcontract to have that substrate replaced. But for the things you were talking about, I agree with Marla, you're probably looking at a GC.
Okay, and then and the only other option that I was just informed of the other day is there's also another license called a remodel. It's a
62 or 61.
It's a B3 remodel license, residential unlimited. Do you guys have any? Would I be able to do basically what a GC could besides building from like a new build? Because it's how they explained it is you can pretty much do any trade remodeling if you're making alterations, fixing, replacing, but the only limitation is you can't, as a general contractor would be able to start a brand new build and build a home from the ground up. Would that B3 remodel unlimited be another option for me besides the general contracting license?
Well, the B3 is a general. It's just we have different levels of generals. So the B3 would definitely do what you're talking about. And this does bring up, and I'm glad you asked, this does bring up a more general idea of if you do have questions about the scope, do call us. I'm posting the exact scopes in the chat function. We know where this stuff is. We're familiar, and we can answer the questions for you. Zach, yeah, by the sounds of what you're looking at, it would be exactly somewhere between a 61, a CR61 or R61 and a B3. Marley, is the 61 limited to 50,000 or less? Is that what
Yes.
the difference? Yeah, so that's the difference between the 61 and the B3, but sounds like you'd be somewhere landing in those if you wanted to do all the work you talked about.
Right, awesome. Thank you guys for answering those questions. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
I have a quick question real fast.
Yep.
If I do just install shower enclosures, just the glass, can I get a R62 license for that to do shower installs, or do I have to get like a glazing license, the whole full glazing license?
Nope. So the R62 could do that shower glass installation. It just needs to be under $5,000 per project, so you couldn't charge more than that.
Okay.
And then the R62 is residential only.
Yeah, I only do residential, and I'm only gonna be doing like remodels,
Mhm.
and all I do is the installs. And if I'm to do them, they probably would only be like around $1,000, or
Mhm.
I mean, at most 3,000.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So an R62 would be perfect for me then.
Yes.
And if
Okay,
you do
thank you.
find that you're approaching or going over that 5,000 limit, then again, just the 61 would be your step up from there.
The 61, and what's the 61 entail like on testing and stuff like that?
We can send the specific testing information, but there are questions about carpentry, a couple different trades, because it allows you to do a lot more than the R62.
And the R61 is a oh gosh, what was I gonna say?
It's in the chat.
Okay, I'll look at that. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Miss Marley, tiered entity.
Okay, so we're talking about ownership. This slide does not pertain to all companies, and applicants, but if you are applying and your entity is owned directly by another entity, so in this example, you're applying as a corporation, it's owned 50-50 by an LLC and then another corporation, you would need to submit this tiered entity chart. This is an example of what we're looking for. And we would need to know ownership of those entities. There needs to be an attestation on there that no other person or entity that's not listed owns more than 25% of the applicant. An authorized signer needs to sign the chart. Tiered entity charts can get complicated. So what we offer is that you email us a copy of your chart and we will pre-review it and send any corrections back, or we'll approve it. And then this won't hinder the application process because you're getting it pre-approved before you apply. And then also feel free to call us to talk through these, because each company is different and these charts can get complicated, but this is an idea of what we require for tiered entities.
And just to point out, one of the biggest, easiest to avoid deficiencies with this chart, beyond it being complicated, but you're going to spend a lot of time on that because you know it's complicated. If you look down in the bottom right-hand corner, right about where the red line that I wish I could get rid of is, it says no persons or entity other than those listed owns 25% or more, and it requires your signature. A lot of the charts that we get just don't have that signature because it's so easy to avoid after spending so much time on the actual chart. So just keep that in mind as you're filling it out if you have to.
Okay.
And if anybody knows how to get rid of the red line on Google Slides, speak up.
Okay.
Marley.
So similar information that's required for qualifying parties is also required for any other persons that are listed on the application. We need to know their name as it's listed on their government issued ID, date of birth, social security number, copy of government issued ID. This is typically a driver's license, but passports work as well. Business or residential address, phone number, email, their title, the percent of ownership that they have, and a background check.
So then just to kind of recap, what we're asking you to do is, again, we license a business entity, then you have to identify and have the requirements met for a qualifying party. And then you also have to list anybody that owns 25% or more, or is listed as personnel with the Corporation Commission. So we're covering a lot of information, but just trying to summarize it for you: business entity, qualifying party, and then ownership and any other personnel. So that's kind of where we are at this point.
Each person on the application is going to attest to some disclosures. They need to indicate if they've been named on a prior license that's been revoked or suspended and give information on that. Any unlicensed activity that they've been convicted of needs to be disclosed. And then any felony or pending felony charges also need to be disclosed. If someone on the application, whether it be a person that's named or the qualifying party, has a felony or pending felony charge, there are certain criminal documents that will be needed to be reviewed by our legal department. This includes the indictment or complaint, any plea agreement, pre-sentence report, documentation of the sentence, completeness of the sentence, and orders restoring rights. There are optional documents that can be submitted if you please. So that includes letters of recommendation, letters of reference, any certificates of programs that were completed. So this pertains to anybody that has a felony or pending felony charge. We will ask that you submit this at the time of the application, and our legal department will review it. This does not mean an automatic denial. Most people with felony charges and convictions are approved for licensure. Zach, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just, in regards to the felony question, if you had a previous undesignated felony, which basically stays idle, it's not a conviction, it's not, and that drops to a misdemeanor when you complete whatever requirements were needed, does an undesignated felony, because it was never a conviction, does that have to be listed on the application? Would it be safe to put the information on there just to be safe, or is that not required? Do you know?
So has it been reduced to a misdemeanor already?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I don't believe it would need to, because so it would have been a felony 6 and it was reduced to a misdemeanor basically.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. I don't believe you need to, but Zach, I can tell you, at a rate of 88%, we pass our applicants who have a felony applicant on their application are given or awarded licenses. So it's not really too much of a hindrance. The only thing, Julie, how do you handle those? Do you know?
We do look at them in the Good Character Committee. So if you were charged with a felony, I recommend that you send the documents. It may not even get to us because the legal department team looks at and clears some of those. But if they, because of the charge, what the charge might be, if they deem that the Good Character Committee should look, then we'll look at it. But like Jim and Marley have said, most of those get passed. It's, you know, most of them get passed. That's all I can say. But yeah,
awesome.
I would send the documentation. That way you're covered.
So just safer. And the reason I hesitate to answer you is prior administrations, this one is not one of them. If you marked no and they found that you were charged with a felony, they may consider that material fact misleading and deny your application. Again, we wouldn't do it, but that's where I was hesitating in answering. But I agree with Julie. It's just safer to submit it and have it checked, and then it'll be checked forever.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, so bonds, as we discussed in the very beginning, this is one of our common deficiencies. So we're going to go over these in detail. Every application is required to have a bond submitted with it. Every license is required to have a bond that covers it. There's no exemptions to bonds. There's 3 types of bonds. The most common that we see are surety bonds. You would contact one of the surety companies. We have a list on our website of people, surety companies that operate in Arizona. You'd pay them a premium. They would issue you a bond that would cover the license. You can also submit a cash bond where you pay the full amount of the bond to the registrar and we hold that to cover the license. Or you can submit a certificate of deposit. So you'd go to a bank to get that set up. You'd submit that paperwork to us and that certificate of deposit would cover the license. Regardless of which one you choose, there are minimum coverage amounts that are based on your estimated volume of work that you're going to do in Arizona and then the classification that you're applying for.
Okay.
And so this chart is showing those minimum bond amounts. So the estimated gross volume you're coming up with, you don't need to submit financial statements to us or anything. This is a number that you're coming up with. And then you're going to go based off license type. So if you're applying for one of our residential general contractor licenses and you estimate that you're going to do less than $750,000 worth of work that year, your minimum bond amount would be $9,000. So you have to have at least the minimum bond amount. You're welcome to go with a higher bond amount. And then if you realize down the line that you don't need a bond that covers bond coverage that high, you can submit a bond rider to us to decrease that bond amount at the time of your renewal, or you're always welcome to increase the amount of your bond at any time.
And does this make sense to everyone? So to go through just one of the examples, the CR7 carpentry, this would be the same for the electrical on the call or the roofing. So if you expected to do under 375,000, you were just doing residential, you would need a bond that covers 4250. If you were doing a dual license for a specialty, then you would need both the commercial and the residential. So say again, you're going with the minimums, 4250 plus 2500. So the actual minimum bond would be that sum, but then you would need it broken out separately on the bond, which we'll talk about.
So I'd be smoking them, but all the old guys are slow. It didn't boost up their speed.
All right. So like we said, surety bonds are our most common bond that we see. So we're going to go over that surety bond form since most people will end up choosing that. So the surety bond form is on our website. So you can download that and give that to your bond company. However, most bond companies are very familiar with how to do our bonds. They probably already have that form. They're going to assign your bond a bond number. And so they'll need to list that on the bond form. This is important because this is a common deficiency. The full legal name of the entity needs to be on the bond as the principal. And then if you have a DBA, it needs to be indicated DBA, whatever that name is. It's very common that leaves off that DBA, but we need to have that on there. The license classification that you're applying for needs to be on there, plus the description. So this is on our website if you don't know what it is, but an example here, the classification is KB2, and then the description is dual, residential, and small commercial. And then the penal sums need to be outlined on your bond. If you have a dual license, we need to know how much of that bond covers commercial projects and how much covers residential, because that is limited. If you have a residential customer that files a claim on the bond, they can only access that residential portion. So this needs to be broken out so that we know those amounts. The bond needs to have an effective date on there and a signed date. Make sure that the effective date of the bond is in the present time. Sometimes bond companies put that effective date months down the line. If you're applying now, we need a bond writer to make that date current. And then bonds cannot be more than 6 months old. So if you apply with a bond maybe you got a year ago, we would need a full force and effect letter from the bond company indicating that that bond is still in effect. We need a signature and the title of an authorized signer. This is another common deficiency where we just don't have a signature by the authorized signer on the application. So make sure that you sign the bond. The bond company will get it notarized, and they are notarizing the signature of the attorney, in fact, and then the bond company needs to put their official seal on the bond.
So a question from Jojo, is the slideshow available to be emailed? We can email it to you. We don't typically, because we do have the recording. So we are recording this and we will be uploading it to YouTube. If you came a couple minutes late, and we'll send out the link to this YouTube video so that you can go back and actually listen to it. Yeah, but if you reach out to Jesse or me, and Jesse can put our contact information in there. Oh, Jesse does email out the slides, never mind. So no further action needed. Now, if you've noticed, Marley spent a lot of time on this slide. It is because the bond is a legal document. It has to be exactly right every single time. So just to recap real quick, what we often see is if you have a DBA, it needs to have your business name, DBA, the DBA name or trade name. The penal sums, if you're going for a dual license, it has to be broken out into residential, how much is being covered under residential, and commercial, how much is being covered. The other ones are, I mean, they're all important, but just going through this, the effective date, we cannot issue a license unless the bond is effective. So as Marley was saying, if it's 2 months in advance, we will not be issuing that license. Well, we'll probably reach out to you and let you know that we wouldn't be able to issue the license for 2 months, but just know that unless the effective date is present, then we cannot issue a license because the bond always has to be active and in full force. Cool, thanks.
Okay, workers' compensation. So we are required by law to make sure that you're in compliance with workers' compensation. So on the application, it's going to ask how you have workers' compensation. You can either give us just the policy number and the company that's issuing your workers' compensation policy. You can just write that out. If you have a certificate from them, you're welcome to upload that to your application. And then if you have proof of self-insurance, we'd ask for that proof. However, the Industrial Commission of Arizona is the agency that regulates workers' compensation. So if you have questions about exemptions, run that past them and then let us know what they say. Have the knowledge behind any exemptions and the statutes that govern workers' compensation. They also set up self-insurance, so that document would probably be coming from them as your proof of self-insurance. But on our application, it's just gonna bullet out how are you in compliance, and then again, if you have a policy number and the insurer, you would just write that out.
Yeah, I can tell you the exceptions are pretty specific and they're pretty rare. They're listed out in our application as the exception. So it'll have you attest that your business is operating as one of these exceptions. And again, if you have any questions about it, Industrial Commission of Arizona is the way to go. They can answer your questions and give you advice otherwise.
This might not apply to everybody, but some people are going to need to submit additional documentation. If you're doing any solar work, you will need to submit a solar warranty. On our website, we have an example solar warranty that you can use to make your solar warranty. If you need to cancel or someone else on the application needs to cancel a license they currently hold, you can submit a license cancellation form. Same thing with an inactivation. An inactivation allows a license that you already hold to be inactive for a period of 5 years. So if you wanted to just have this one license, you can put another license on hold and submit that form when you apply. And if your qualifying party needs to disassociate from a current license that they're on, they can submit a notice of disassociation for that existing license.
And just to run through it real quick, so solar and pool contractors, pool installation or remodeling contractors, there are additional statutory requirements on you if you're becoming a licensee. With regards to pool installation or remodeling, there are additional contract requirements for you. If you're looking to get into solar, then we would require a solar warranty, as Marley talked about. Cancellation, you may need or want to cancel a license. So you're obtaining a new license, you currently have a license. The application in the portal will allow you to do the cancellation upon issuance of the new license. Once you're licensed in activation, say you're, I don't know, the economy you see is going down into the tank, it's diving, you're getting out of construction, but you don't want to get rid of the license. You can actually inactivate a construction license, Arizona Registrar of Contracting license, twice for 5 years each. You would need to notify us in that 5th year that you would want to reactivate or continue or reapply for an activation. But for various reasons, after you get the license issued, you may want to inactivate. That's available to you. That just means the license remains inactive. You wouldn't have to retest. You would have to just file fees to inactivate and reactivate. And if it was around, I don't know how you handle renewal, but if it was, it would just pick up at the same time, right, Marley?
So they need to submit a reactivation if they want to do that, and then we would approve that reactivation, and then their renewal would be 2 years from the date that we reactivated.
Got it. And then finally, the disassociation resignation. Say your qualifying party dies, your qualifying party quits, or is fired. Those are where the designation or disassociation or resignation of personnel from the license would come into play.
Okay, so just to recap, we're going to go over those 5 most common application deficiencies to hopefully help you avoid those. 1 is qualifying parties' experience not being relevant to the classification that's being applied for, or not being detailed enough, or sometimes not giving enough years that are required, maybe only outlining 1 year, but the license requires 4 years of experience. Those bond deficiencies, so the bond not being signed by an authorized signer, the penal sums not being broken out, or the entity name not being correct or missing the DBA. 3 is government issued IDs not being submitted for everybody on the application. 4 is testing. So either not submitting testing, not submitting waivers if that applies, or tests are only good for 2 years from when they're taken, so submitting outdated testing. And then 5 is background checks not being submitted, or background checks submitted that are over 90 days old.
Okay. Thank you, Marley.
Neil, did you have a question?
Yeah, so my previous employer is in New York, and I don't want to get too weird about this, but he's kind of a strange human being. So just quick, like I know there's not going to be deviation from this, but I'll need to get a full background check from him since he was my employer, is what I'm understanding, for my application of doing all this licensing, and I'll need to get all of my previous work records sent as well from him from the alternative state.
No, so a background check is literally a criminal background check. It has nothing to do with your prior work. Your prior work is going to come into play with experience, and there, what we require, you can think of it kind of like a resume. What we require is a reference to somebody who has firsthand knowledge of your work. So if we've all had those bosses, if our boss is a little bit weird, maybe you can use a coworker, your manager, your manager's manager, whoever you want to use as your reference is who you would put on experience. But regarding background check, that's specifically your criminal background check.
All right, so the reference wouldn't necessarily need a background check, or they would need a background check?
No, your reference is who you want us to call to verify your experience. That's it.
Okay, so the only person that needs a background check is myself.
Anybody on the license, so personnel, qualifying party, sounds like it's just going to be yourself. So to answer yes, yeah. More generally for the group, any personnel owners over 25% or the qualifying party.
That's perfect, because the person, my coworker, was pretty much the only person I worked for. So my main boss, I won't really need to use much from him besides for getting my records of where I work. So I appreciate that help, and that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable.
Of course. Julie?
Yeah. One more thing is you don't need to get anything from him in terms of records. You just need to list, there's like a paragraph space. Just outline for us what exactly you did in reference to what you're applying for. So if you're applying for the B3, it needs to sound like you have the experience for a B3. So you don't need to get anything from him. That was a thing we did in the past, but we do not any longer require that.
Oh, that's awesome. That means basically as long as I can pass the test for the things that I'm registering for, and I write down the exact dates and such from my prior, basically such as a resume, that will be sufficient. And I don't need to recontact these strange folks, and I can just use myself.
Yeah, the only thing I could tell you is just be as detailed as possible when describing the experience you have. So as opposed to a resume where, I personally would say, work with Arizona legislature. I would specifically say, work with Arizona legislature on Commerce Committee regarding Registrar of Contractors, statutory changes and amendments previously passed. You get pretty detailed. So for your reference, what you would want to say is, if you're HVAC, talk about the type of systems that you've installed. If you're general contracting applicant, talk about the trades or specific types of scopes that you've managed or the projects that you've worked on. You cannot be too specific when filling out the experience form in that regard, but as it relates to who you have to claim as to who we will follow up with, that's your choice. I laugh because we used to have a posting list that we were required to publish the licensed applicants who were applying for a license. And for a 2-year period, we received 3 negative comments about applicants. And one of them was a father who his son owed him money, and the other 2 were bosses. And they were trying to talk negatively about their employee leaving. So it's not helpful to us if your boss is not helpful to you. So we recognize that. Ms. Barley.
That is very awesome.
Cool. And so everyone knows I do have a hard stop at noon, so I'm going to make Marley the host of this, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. We're coming to the end of the slideshow, though.
So application fees real quick. This is outlining the application fees based on classification. As you'll notice, there's that application fee, which is basically a review fee. This is non-refundable if you decide to withdraw your application or your application gets returned for whatever reason. However, the license fees would be refunded to you. And these are paying for the license for the 2 years that it's active before you need to renew it. And then as you'll notice, anybody that does residential work has to pay to the recovery fund. So residential dual contractors pay that recovery fund assessment, and that pays into the recovery fund that is open to residential customers. If they go through the complaint process, they can access the recovery fund. It's a form of consumer protection. Then we have the total fees there. And then you need to renew your license every 2 years. So you have 2 years from the date it's issued till you need to renew it. And these fees are reduced slightly once we get into those renewal fees. Okay, so once your application is submitted, we have some statutory timeframes that we need to abide by. So we have 20 calendar days to do an administrative review, 40 calendar days to do substantive reviews. That makes 60 days total. Most applications are issued much sooner than that, but I would recommend to everybody that you maintain open communication with your application reviewer. You're just gonna have one person that's reviewing your application. They're your point of contact. They're reviewing the application. If they send you notice of deficiencies, communicate with them, ask them questions if you don't understand exactly what they're asking for. That's who you're sending your deficiencies to. Email them if you mailed them in so that they can look for those. That's a really good way to get your application issued sooner, is getting those deficiencies in as soon as possible. And then once the reviewer has everything they need, they send it to final review, where a supervisor does one final review. If we find any corrections that are needed, it goes back to the application reviewer. If everything's good, it will be approved right then and there.
A quick question.
Yes.
Mary?
Can anybody discuss this with the reviewer, or do I need to do a corporate resolution so that you guys can talk to me?
Yeah, so we'll give detailed information to authorized representatives that are listed on the application, but many companies, have a specific employee that does all of their licensing. So we can discuss information about the application with you if you're the one submitting it. But if there's sensitive information that needs to be discussed, maybe if it's about felonies or something, we would ask to talk to that specific person that's on the application.
Okay.
Cool. And Troy, we have a question from you regarding commercial versus residential. Regarding the Circle K, that's clearly a commercial job. The reason I have trouble answering you though is we can get into a little bit of code versus statute, or not versus, but where they complement each other.
Exactly.
When it relates to apartment complexes or mixed use facilities. But Circle K would clearly be a commercial.
And even and so commercial would be more defined by say business to business, even if we're working on equipment that could be installed in either residential or commercial applications.
Think zoning in that sense.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep. Think
Thank
zoning.
you.
Yep, of course.